creeping through the haze, shadows dance in twisted ways, echoes hum from worlds unseen. This is where the strange convene. Step into the unknown mind, secrets hidden, twist and bind, truths that linger in between. Welcome to the spectral stream.
Okay, so have you ever thought about, like, what if you could write something down, but without actually moving your hand? Or what if you found, like, a message inside a box that nobody ever opened?
Yeah, it's almost like something out of those old mystery movies or something.
Right, total mind bender. Well, today that's kind of the rabbit hole we're going down. We're looking into something called psychography, which some people call independent writing.
Yeah, and basically it's this idea that writing can just happen on its own without, a person actually putting pen to paper, so to speak.
Yeah, so no hams, basically. And we've got a whole bunch of fascinating stuff for this deep dive, like old historical accounts, firsthand stories from people who say they actually saw this happen, and even like reports from scientists and folks in those spiritualist circles all trying to figure out what the heck was going on.
And the thing is, we're not here to tell you what to believe or anything like that. It's more about like taking a good look at what these different sources say about psychography, the situations where it supposedly happened, and the different explanations people have come up with. It's like a crash course on a really strange topic.
Okay, so like where do we even start with something like this? Do we have any like early examples to kind of set the stage?
We do. One of the big names from way back is this guy, Baron Guldenstub. He was known for being able to get writing to appear without anyone helping him, and often in ways that seemed to rule out any tricks.
Okay, but like what kind of situations are we talking about here? Were there people watching?
Well, the sources don't always give us every single detail about what happened with Guldenstub.
Yeah.
But the main thing is that writing would just pop up out of nowhere without anyone seeing a human hand doing it.
Mm.
And what's interesting is that this whole psychography thing isn't just some recent fad. It's got a pretty long history. They called it director-independent writing back then, and people who studied weird stuff way back in medieval times even knew about it.
So it's not like some new agey thing. It's got some real roots.
Exactly. And, we always picture this kind of stuff happening in a dark, spooky room, right? But the sources actually say that darkness wasn't always needed. Sometimes it was for things that involve light, but a lot of times this writing stuff supposedly happened in normal light.
Huh. So it's not always about the creepy vibes then.
Not necessarily.
Mm.
And, beyond those early stories, we actually have accounts where people try to test this stuff out and see if it was real. Like there's this one story about a sealed box, and the person who set this up, they were really serious about making sure no one could cheat. They put 2 handbells and a pencil inside an envelope and had everyone there sign their initials on it. Then they put that envelope in a wooden box. But wait, there's more.
Okay, there's more. I'm intrigued.
Oh yeah, they went all out. They tied the box up with cord, sealed it with wax, and because they didn't have an official seal, they even hammered nails into the lid. Each person got to hammer in a nail. And to make extra sure, they wrapped this cord all around the box really tight so it pressed into the wood, and then tied it up, covered the knots with wax, and stamped it with their rings.
Wow, that's like Fort Knox level security. You'd think they were worried about someone breaking in, not just about a pencil writing something. So what happened next?
So they left the box in the light for a bit, and then people started hearing sounds from inside, like the bells were moving around. Then the box started rocking, and one end even lifted up a little. After a few minutes, this Matra monk said maybe they should turn off the lights, thinking it might make whatever was happening stronger. So they did. And a bit later, this sphere control. Now, in spiritualism, a spirit control is like a spirit guide that helps with communication, named Samuel, was said to have taken over the medium who was there. And they asked Samuel if he could write something, even with all that crazy security and now in the dark.
And could he? I mean, did anything actually happen?
Well, according to the account, Samuel said he thought he could, and asked what they wanted written. Later, when they opened the box, and remember, it was still all sealed up the same way they found a piece of writing inside.
No way. So even with all that, they still got writing. Were there any other times where people tried to test this in a controlled way?
Yeah. In 1877, there were these 2 professors, Zollner and Weber. And they did this experiment with 2 regular school slates. They marked the slates in a specific way and cleaned them really well. Then they put a tiny piece of pencil lead between the slates and tied them together super tight with string. They just put the tied up slates on a normal wooden table. And guess what? When they checked the slates, there was writing on the inside.
Wait, the inside.
Right.
How could anyone fake that without messing up the strings? That's just bizarre.
It really makes you think about how that could have happened normally. And then there are these first-hand stories from the sources themselves. One author, who just calls themselves I, talks about meeting this psychic slate in a brightly lit room. They held hands at a slate together, and the author noticed that every time they let go of Slade's hand, the writing on the slate stopped. And when they held hands again, the writing started right back up. And this writing even happened on a porcelain slate that the author held all by themselves without Slade even touching it.
So it wasn't like Slade's touch was making it happen or something.
Yeah, it seems that way. There's another story about a psychic named F.W. Monk. This time they used 2 new small slates, again marked and cleaned and tied together with a special knot. They put a tiny bit of pencil lead inside, and the author asked for the word snow to be written. The author said they could hear writing happening between the slates. And then Monk, who was in a trance, said that the word had been written.
So they untied the slates, and what did they find?
Okay, so when they opened them, there was a messed up S that looked erased, and the other letters were written in this really weird specific way. But here's the kicker. All this info about the messed up S and the weird letters was given while the slates were still tied up under the author's finger.
Man, these first-hand accounts are wild. It's one thing to hear a story, but it's different when people are trying so hard to make sure it's not a trick. Did anyone ever, investigate these mediums to see if they were legit?
Oh yeah, people definitely tried to figure out what was going on. The Berlin court conjurer even investigated Slade. And one thing they noticed was that the writing on the slates often looked a lot like the medium's own handwriting. Now, you could see that 2 ways, right?
Well, yeah, I was going to say, if the writing looks like the medium's, doesn't that mean they were faking it?
You'd think so, but some people who study this stuff think it actually proves that it's real.
Wait, what? How does that make sense?
Okay, so the idea is that if a spirit is trying to communicate through a medium, it might end up using the medium's own muscle memory and habits, like how they usually write letters. It's like when you try to copy someone's signature at first, it might look a bit like your own handwriting. There's also a story about this guy, Mr. Simmons, who was known for being super honest. He was asked directly if the writing on the slates looked like Dr. Slade's, and he said yes, it did. The point is that it really helps to have people who know what they're doing checking this stuff out, like someone who's good at analyzing handwriting or even a magician. They might be able to spot a fake.
That's a good point. So we've heard about all these weird happenings, but was there anything specific that made this writing more likely to occur?
Yeah, the sources mentioned some interesting things about that. It seems like some psychics could do this stuff on their own, but others needed a group of supportive people around them, what they called a sympathetic circle. They didn't really know exactly how this worked, but one thing that kept coming up was how important it was for the psychic to be calm and peaceful. They thought things like singing soft songs, having nice smells around, and having friendly conversations could help create a good atmosphere. Even quiet prayer or meditation was thought to be useful.
So it's not just the physical stuff, but the mood of the room matters too.
Yep. And they said the best setting was a group of friends with about the same number of men and women all chilling around a table that wasn't covered with anything. Dim lighting was better, and they thought bright lights and people staring too intensely could mess things up. Sometimes they did this in total darkness, especially for stuff that involved noises or lights. But the sources actually say that's not a good idea.
Really?
No.
Why not? Seems like that would make it spookier.
Well, they say it's because you can't really see what's going on in the dark. So it's easier for someone to fake it or for things to get a little shady. Plus, they thought it might attract what they called intelligences that weren't so good.
Intelligences. Ooh, that sounds kind of ominous.
It does get into those spiritualist beliefs, which we'll talk about.
Yeah.
But from a practical standpoint, they just meant that you couldn't really be sure what was happening in the dark.
Yeah.
They thought it was better to have enough light so everyone could see clearly, especially if you wanted to convince skeptics or learn more about how this stuff worked. They saw private gatherings with friends who were already into spiritualism as a different thing, though.
Makes sense. So we've talked about what happens and how it happens, but what about the why? What were some of the explanations for how this psychography thing could even be possible?
Well, there are a bunch of theories. One big one was this idea of a psychic force, like some kind of energy or power that worked through people who were naturally sensitive to it. They thought this force was controlled by some kind of intelligence. but not necessarily the intelligence of anyone in the room. Some people even said that cultures that were more spiritual, especially in the East, were more open to this kind of thing because they believed in inner knowledge and psychic powers.
That's interesting. So are we talking like Eastern philosophies and stuff?
Yeah, that kind of thing.
Huh.
But of course, they also consider the possibility that some of it was just tricks and sleight of hand. There's a whole debate about whether it was real spiritual stuff or just clever illusions. They even mentioned the famous French magician Houdin, who investigated clairvoyance, so people were skeptical. But the author of one of our main sources says he wasn't trying to push any one theory. He just wanted to record what people were reporting and said they needed way more solid evidence before they could come up with a good explanation.
So it was more about just gathering information and not jumping to conclusions.
Exactly. They wanted to present what people said happened and keep an open mind because they knew they might not have all the answers yet.
Makes sense. You got to know what you're dealing with before you can explain it. So we talked about spiritualist beliefs earlier. What did they say about psychography?
Well, we get some clues from the writings of this medium, Stainton Moses. He said that spirits could act like amanuenses, which is like a fancy word for scribes. Basically, they could write messages for other spirits who wanted to communicate through this direct writing thing. He said that not that many spirits could actually do the writing themselves, and it was usually done by spirits who were used to doing it that way. Sometimes they even said it took a bunch of spirits working together.
Whoa, so it's not always the spirit who wants to talk that's doing the writing, like they have a ghostwriter or something.
Yeah, kind of. There's even a story about a spirit who was writing directly and misspelled a name. They said the spirit who was doing the actual writing messed up, but the spirit who was trying to communicate was vouched for by another more powerful spirit called Imperator.
That is so strange. It's like they had a whole system for the spirit communication thing.
It is pretty wild. The sources also talk about the mindset of the medium. Sometimes they said it was easier for spirits to communicate if the medium's mind was quiet, but they also said messages came through in all kinds of different mental states. One interesting thing is that they warn about what they call undeveloped spirits, who might try to mess things up and make it look like the real spiritual stuff was fake. Especially as more people started talking about these phenomena, they saw it as a kind of attack on genuine spiritual exploration.
So basically like spiritual trolls trying to stir up trouble?
Yeah, that's actually a good way to put it. They thought that not all spirits were good or had good intentions, and some might try to mislead people who were trying to investigate this stuff. Shows how important it was to be careful and use your judgment in spiritualism.
Man, this has been a trip.
Yeah.
So can we just do a quick recap of the main points about psychography?
Of course. We saw how the idea of writing without a human hand has been around for ages. We looked at stories and experiments where people tried to make sure there were no tricks and got results that are hard to explain. We talked about mediums and how the environment and people's mindsets could affect things. And we explored the different theories from psychic force to the idea of spirits communicating from beyond.
And we were careful to say that we're not trying to prove or disprove any of this, right?
Right. We just wanted to show you what these old sources said about psychography. It's
Right.
all about giving you a good overview of the evidence and the different ideas.
So as we wrap this up, here's something to think about. Knowing that people have been reporting this psychography thing for centuries and that it supposedly happened in all sorts of different situations, what does that tell us about how communication works? And what does it say about what human consciousness can really do? What new questions does this whole thing raise for you?
And if you're really interested, we totally recommend checking out those original sources or reading more about this stuff. It's a fascinating topic, and there's so much more to explore.
Definitely a deep dive for sure.
Absolutely.
Whispers creeping through the haze, shadows dance in twisted ways, echoes hum from worlds unseen. This is where the strange convene. Step into the unknown mind, secrets hidden, twist and bind, truths that linger in between. Well, becomes your home. Questions rise like fragile smoke. The uncharted realm silently spoke.